Check it out. In this video, I'm going to be reviewing Thornton's premium oil-based paint markers. These paint markers are advertised to work on a variety of surfaces. Some include metal, pottery, wood, rubber, glass, plastic, stone, canvas, leather, and much more. I'll be using mine on a few different applications, including plastic, paper, and some big poster. These sets are priced at $20 a piece, and they come with 15 markers. They're available in 3 different sizes. You have the medium, the extra fine, and then the fine tip markers. Thornton's has supported this video by supplying me with these markers. My review of the markers is going to be solely based on their performance for my drawing applications. So let's find out where these markers work best and fit into my art. So when juicing up the markers, it's essential that you shake it up first of all. Make sure you get everything inside mixed around. And then you're going to want to depress the pump one time upright, and that'll allow the pressure inside to neutralize depending on where these are manufactured and where you're actually using them. You could have a ton of paint want to spray out if you are, in my case, in a high altitude with a lot less pressure in the atmosphere. The paint inside is going to want to evacuate pretty heavily. So that's a good tip regardless, just to make sure you're not dripping a ton of paint out on your first pump. And then this way you can make sure to feed that nib evenly as well. And then just juice it as normal, pushing up and down probably about 50 times before the paint actually bleeds out of that nib, and then you're good to write. I got quite a few more of these, so cue the time lapse and we'll get everything juiced up. Ooh! So not following my own instructions, I went right in on that brown, and you can see that's exactly what you don't want to do. So quick juice nonetheless, but wasted a little bit of paint there. Let's make sure to depress all the nibs before getting into them. So a quick look at all these colors. It's interesting to see that the colors are a little bit more muted than what the caps are showing. Specifically this lime green definitely has more of that kind of oily look to it. So we'll see if that holds up on some maybe vinyl applications where the stuff doesn't set in, and you're going to be able to have it be as true to the color that's sitting inside the bottle as possible. You can see the aqua color here is almost like a dark turquoise. So interesting, not too abnormal for oil-based paint markers actually. It is kind of hard to get a lot of these colors really true, but some of the orange and yellow, really impressed with. Reds look great as well. Those are some of those kind of bread and butter colors that everybody can really knock out of the park. So interested to try these out on full application. Got quite a bit more juicing to go on my end. Get some of the fine and extra fine tips leveled up as well. So no complaints about juicing up all 15 markers. All the colors look just as the same as the last batch. Very cool that we have consistency, obviously a great bonus there. So it's really important to note that the fine point and the extra fine point basically have the exact same bodies. Really, before taking the cap off, the only difference is the labeling down here. We got the fine point on top and then the extra fine point label on the bottom. So ideally, you're gonna have to find a way to keep these separate, or you'll be opening caps 24/7 trying to keep them a little bit distinct. So maybe I'll put a white dot on top of all the markers that are the extra fine tip on my case, just so keep things a little bit consistent and not too confusing for the using side of things. So a quick detail here on the extra fine point marker. We got the same labeling all across there, and then we got the Thornton's logo as well. You have the metal reinforced nib, so you can keep a very fine line on top. And these are actually a white style versus the kind of yellowy color of the other nib. So interesting to see that. And these feel a little bit softer as well, so maybe they'll kind of break in a little differently. So here we have the detail on the fine point marker, nice metal body as well. You can see we've got the lime green everywhere on this, between the color on the marker and then the cap. Slightly different hues as well, but the cap's definitely closer to the actual color, as I've already juiced this guy. And then a detail in there on the nib. You can see we've got that kind of 2mm style plastic valve as well. So these markers are writing great to start, but a little interesting fact about some of the lighter colors like this yellow is going over top of the darker colors, you're not actually getting that full opacity that you see off the white backdrop. Paper is allowing it to kind of soak in a little, so the opacity is not perfect with something that has like a paper or something that is a little bit absorbent. So just to know that you're not getting that full color, and you can see a little bit of differences in between the shading of even the orange right here. So it's interesting to kind of follow that and make sure that a couple coats is definitely going to be required. You can see here, you can very visibly see the orange under that. So in that case, definitely just going to be cutting back with the darker color and being kind of cautious of that, because darker on top of the lighter, no issue there. Get a nice smooth cut back. Can't even see the yellow under it, but when you're trying that lighter stuff, kind of sets in, and that's pretty common with most oil-based paint markers. So a fact about them that you just kind of need to know and work around. So the red's having a little bit trouble with the opacity. You can see it's really spotty depending on where I covered twice or 3 times just in natural passes. So gonna hit it with a deliberate second coat, see if that helps things out. So something to know about oil-based paint markers is that they're actually able to resaturate and pick up some dried paint. So right here on the tie, totally dry section, but with the paint of the orange, you can actually pull away, and now if I draw over here, I've actually picked up some of that. So you can see the darker sections in there, and that's literally just picking out some of that black. So you got to be really careful, take a really light touch to it so you're not, really grinding it up, and then you're gonna have to smooth out anything that you do pick up. So I've seen this with a ton of different oil-based paint markers. It's kind of a drawback in my opinion. It doesn't really work so great for cutbacks because you have to be really cognizant of it, but altogether, just something to keep in mind. So I definitely want to try these on the non-porous surface. I know oil-based paint markers in the past have worked wonderful on side shelf vinyl. So we got some holographic vinyl right here. Be sure to always check out my web shop if you want to grab some yourself. But just simply the combination of both the smooth surface and the oil works really well. Slicks nicely, you can smooth, no friction there. Now this is going to bond much better to the surface than acrylic would. Acrylic pretty much just sits on top of vinyl, but here it's actually going to bond to the surface pretty well, so you're not going to be able to scratch it off. So taking a close-up look here too, it's nice to see that there's no streaking or inconsistencies in that blue color on the holographic vinyl. You see that both even 2 passes or 3 passes in some cases have the same layout of what the opacity of the blue is. So really nice to see that. So a little scratch test here. You can see it moves it a teeny bit, but acrylic would totally just crack off at this point. So as always, oil-based paint markers on vinyl is definitely the go-to measure. So here you can see I'm able to get really rounded and smooth lines just because of the fact that there's far less friction on vinyl, and compared to paper that is, but also the oil just has a nice slickness to it that the nibs on traditional alcohol markers or nibs on a traditional acrylic paint marker would kind of grab at the surface of paper a little bit more. Since the nibs are the hardest style, it sits easily on top of that surface and just makes my life a lot easier. So in this purple color, you can see slightly different variations in the 2 passes I made. So the opacity is not as perfect in that. and it is writing a little differently, but you know, that's not a super drawback here. You know, most of the time you're not really going to be using it in this application. I'm not sure I would go as far as to, you know, do a full color in on this style of vinyl, but I've got some black vinyl, so maybe let's do a negative throw up on there and do a full color in and see what the white works out with. Definitely a little bit looser here, not as opaque as I would have expected. Let's see if, yeah, the opacity on the thin one's doing a lot better. Let me try and juice this up a little bit more for the fill. So that's a little bit more in line with what I was expecting, but it seems to be thinning out. So as I write, you're not getting that totally consistent white. If I'm to slow down a little bit, it's pretty much a light gray now. There's enough black showing through that, you know, the opacity isn't totally there. So let's give it a once over and maybe do a second pass, and I'll see if that's good enough to call, you know, an A+ job. So in sections that I was going a little bit slower at, I was able to actually see that the white was blending in with my previous streaks to create a pretty uniform color there. So right down at the bottom you can see a little bit more streaking, not as much paint on there and not as much opacity. But in these top sections, when I'm drawing over it, it had a streak to start, but as that paint settled in and didn't actually soak into a surface, since it's the vinyl, it was able to give a pretty smooth application. So I'm pretty happy with this. You know, vinyl is a tough medium to get something super perfect on, but let's hit it with an outline, go from there. I'm actually going to let that dry. Let's try out some of the other lighter colors and see how they rock. As we saw with the paper, the paint marker sets in a little bit to a porous surface. So here, you can see the black looks just fine, deep color and whatnot, but trying something a little bit lighter, like say this yellow, it almost is invisible. The yellow is pretty much invisible in here. Now that's just because the pigments don't actually have a ton of opacity, it seems, and it's relying on a lot to stay on top of that surface. So deep colors like the blues and purples, I'm sure will write just fine. But anything lighter like the white and whatnot is not actually going to hold much water. So keep that in mind when using this and selecting an application. Wood and something super porous like cardboard, you're not going to have the best performance out of the lighter colors. So I'm really impressed in the dark surface test. You can see all these colors came out super vibrant. Green was a little iffy, not quite exactly what the color on the cap was inciting. I was looking for more of a super lime green, but you know, it is what it is. Amongst all the colors, that and the blue are the only ones that really showed any issue. Altogether, super opaque. You can tell that most of these are just writing no issue, first pass. A little bit darker hue, obviously, in the yellows and whatnot. You're seeing some of the black surface come back through it, but altogether, very impressed. So on surfaces that are smooth and non-porous, these markers are going to work flawlessly on that first pass. Really excited to, you know, get on some more shells with these. The holographic and black combo is just going to be my bread and butter, that's for sure. And something that I'm really also impressed with is the silver and gold. Sometimes with silver and gold, they're actually terrible performing on the black just because it's a little bit too much of an oil slick and there's not enough of that holographic pigment in there. But both of these wrote just as great as any other silver and gold marker that I would want. And altogether for that price point too, it's hard to find silver and gold at the basically $1 price point that work really well. So I was super happy with that. I can confidently say that these are going to be part of the arsenal. Some of the mishaps here might not make a common appearance, but all these colors are going to be a great staple for myself. So I filmed that original set of clips about a week ago while using all the paint markers for the first time. I've since used them on a few different applications, so I wanted to go through, show off, and give a little detail on where I've used them and how they're kind of growing on me. So here we've got just the silver chrome and the black outline. Once again, this is paper, so it's set in a little bit on both the silver and the black, so it took 2 outlines probably to get a nice kind of black solid coverage there. And then there is a little bit of bleed through on the paper because it is kind of setting in there, but didn't make it to the next page at all, so that's good to know. As far as another piece that I worked on, flipping through here, I used it on a couple other things. Used the black to outline in here. All the other yellow and coloring and whatnot was old drawings, but all the black was that fine point, so worked out pretty well in there, no complaints. And then used it on this piece to see how And then I used it on this page to see how it would actually cover over some pre-existing paint markers from some other brands. So the dark blue worked pretty well. Orange took probably 3 or 4 coats to actually get to where it is right now. And even still, you can still see some of those darker colors under it. So once again, reiterating, this isn't the super kind of cut back style that you're gonna get. This is gonna work well on paper and on the first pass with darker over lighter, but lighter over darker is not gonna be, you know, your best bet, especially even after 3 whole coats on this. You're still seeing some discrepancies here in the shading with some of these tags underneath. Okay, and that looks like it for the black book, and I want to do a formal swatch test here, shake them up, show you how they've worked after they've kind of set up a little bit. So on these last couple colors, you saw me pretty aggressively shaking them up and making sure that I'm getting the right pigment coming out. So these are some colors that I didn't use a ton during my piece, so they didn't really get warmed up and shaken properly. You're going to really want to shake these up as best you can. Really try to get all that pigment mixed up, and don't juice it until you have mixed it up really, really thoroughly. Like most paint markers, the body of the paint's going to saturate into the nib much quicker. And if you do flood it with just that oil and not much of the pigment, it's going to be hard to actually have that pigment kind of then remix in through all of the nibs. So be sure on your first pass, shake these up super aggressively, get everything mixed up, and then start pumping. You will see even still we have some darker hues here, so with that aqua and that lime green, so they're kind of that off kind of grayed color, so not ideally that vibrant kind of fluorescent color the cap suggests. Some of my favorite colors in the mix here are that orange, the royal blue, we've got the black, which is a nice solid color, silver and gold are perfect, and then that pink color, also great color in the mix. Purple worked flawlessly right out the back as well. Altogether a slightly dark palette here. And as I suggested at the beginning, these nibs also do have a break-in period. Here's a black that I've been using pretty heavily, drawn a ton of stickers. You can see the thickness of the line there. And then let's pick, I know I haven't used the brown much at all, what it originally starts out at. You can see the line thickness has already doubled in size, so keep that in mind. Your medium tip is going to come out pretty fat after you get, working with it. I've used the black through plenty of stickers and even hit up some colors here, so you got that nice yellow in there, and then we got a little mix-up of colors as well. So altogether, I've been using the black quite heavily, and that's why, the marker nib is breaking in like that. So on the surface, you can see a little bit of flaring over to the side. That's definitely the softness of it, and that's compared to the original one. So it's definitely growing in many directions from, not only pressing down on the page, but also, giving that friction to break up the tip of the nib as well. So keep that in mind. You will have a little bit of a change over time, but that happens with, lots of paint marker nibs at this point. So something to be expected as well. So I'm not sure if Thornton's innovated this packaging design, but the fact that you get this marker organizer and that it's kind of in that cascaded set so you can see everything really nicely, really easily, I'm going to commend them a ton on this packaging. I'm very impressed with that. This is going to make keeping them on a desk much easier. It has a nice weight to it too, so I wouldn't feel worried that you're going to bump this just a teeny bit and the markers are going to go flying or fall off and just get mixed up and be a hassle at the end of the day. This is definitely an awesome bonus. The fact that these are rectangles too, they're going to pack nicely next to one another, and they're not going to take up a bunch of unnecessary space on your desk. Really just what you need for the markers and to be able to see them easily. So in the future, I don't see myself using this a ton on the black book style or the paper side. I can definitely see myself using them in the vinyl application, drawing up stickers, using them for that. So getting good durability out of my stickers so that they're going to be able to withstand some weathering. But also not every paint marker works well on that vinyl surface. The oil base clearly bonds to the surface well. I wasn't able to easily scratch it off. That's something that acrylics really have nothing on. And not to mention you get this awesome organizer packed with it all. That definitely has to add some value in making the purchase, and putting each marker at basically $1 a piece and then maybe $5 towards the organizer, you really can't go wrong with the fact that it's 20 bucks for 15 markers. Color range isn't super wide, so this is definitely an add-on to your pack, or maybe a good starter pack to get into some paint marker stuff, especially if you want to get some stickers that will be able to withstand a little bit more of the elements. So the 3 different nib sizes went really well. I was very impressed with each of them. Obviously they all have their own little function, so extra fine tip I use for cutting back and getting those teeny tiny details in. I really did like how the nib held up, and it actually was probably the best at applying the paint, just because it was a very small section. It was able to maintain opacity, and it wasn't like you were filling in a big area. So I used the fine tip for the outline in the piece. Granted, it was probably too big for an outline in a black book, but you know, you get the extra fine for that sake. So keep that in mind. A little bit thicker, you know, 2 millimeters, so outlining for a throw up or whatnot on a sticker, definitely be applicable. Big medium tip over here, might be a little bit large for those outlines, so that's the one downside to this, is you kind of have to go for that full set pack to get the different sizes. So maybe they'll at one point offer a mixed set, but ideally, you know, I find that I'm comfortable using all these markers because I do have the liberty to use them in all those different sizes. And now I'm just realizing I forgot to demo that marker flip modification for the other nib, so let's give that a try real quick. So simply on the medium tip, take out your nib, now you commit to get a little messy, and then just flip it over, and now you've got a slightly smaller nib on there. So let's try that out. Now this is voiding your warranty of performance, I'm sure, but definitely worth the while to try it out. So that being said, maybe it's a good idea to pick up the medium pack and commit to this as your little outline smaller size. You can see it writes probably about half as thick as the medium-sized nib, so get you down to that 2 millimeter mark, which in my opinion is perfect for outlining. So if you guys are looking for some oil-based paint markers, maybe you do have some of that sticker applications like I do, throw this in your arsenal, go give them a check out. 20 bucks for that big mix pack is going to be worth your while. And honestly, big shout out to Thornton's for, you know, sending these my way and letting me run through the paces. Definitely recommend using these on those few applications, as well as, you know, keep in mind that they're not perfect for everything, but you know, every marker doesn't have to be. So altogether, definitely a great time using these, and look forward to reviewing some more products in the future. If you have any suggestions on future products or materials to use, hit me up in the comment section down below. I always, you know, like to see what you guys are interested in, and check out, you know, what I need to run through the paces to ensure that you guys are spending your money wisely on some good products. Thornton sells through Amazon, so easy and accessible for almost anybody in the world, I'm sure, but definitely go check them out. I'll have links down below for those mix packs, and hopefully you guys find a good use of this in your own toolbox. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to spray that like button. The support goes tremendously far. And also check out some of the other videos I've been posting. Gotten back into a lot of the DIY stuff, so a lot of cool little projects coming out. Not to mention, you know, a lot of stickers as well. So peep those videos on screen right now, or consider joining the crew by subscribing so you don't miss any future uploads. That's gonna do it for me, guys. Peace.